Thank you. It's a great honor and a privilege to be able to introduce to you today one of my very best friends, Professor John O. McGinnis. Professor McGinnis is being appointed to the George C. Dix Professorship in Constitutional Law. John is quite simply one of the most remarkable people I've ever met in my life and has been a wonderful friend and colleague over the last 10 years. I first met John when we both worked at the Justice Department in the 1980s under Attorney General Ed Meese. John was one of the many very bright young lawyers who were hired at the Justice Department at that time, and he became very well regarded in conservative legal circles. John quickly made a splash and set himself apart, however, when the Office of Legal Counsel was asked to rule on the constitutionality of Attorney General Meese's plan for mandatory drug testing of all Justice Department employees. John took the view that Mr. Meese's drug testing plan suffered from grave constitutional problems, and he declined to approve it. This led to the first and only time that I've ever heard John criticized by my conservative friends for suspected Bolshevist sympathies. In all seriousness, John's behavior in this instance was brave and principled, and was a model of the kind of advice a good lawyer should always be prepared to give to his client. John next came to my attention in 1993 when he published a scathing critique in the Texas Law Review of a Yale Law Journal article on the process for confirming Supreme Court justices, written by then University of Chicago law professors David Strauss and Cass Sunstein. John described the article he was criticizing as being, quote, riddled with errors of fact, distortions of interpretation, and omissions of key evidence, even from the very sources being cited. Among other things, John caught Professors Strauss and Sunstein misattributing a key statement at the Philadelphia Convention to Robert Morris when it had in fact been uttered by Gouverneur Morris, instead an ardent defender of presidential power. This first Law Review article was a tremendous success and established John at the very start of his academic career as a first-rate scholar and writer. John has excelled as a law professor and as a scholar. He's the author of 2 books, Originalism and the Good Constitution with Mike Rappaport, which is forthcoming with Harvard University Press, and also Accelerating Democracy, which is forthcoming with Princeton University Press. John has been the author of more than 65 law review articles, and his work has been published by the Harvard Law Review, the Yale Law Journal, the Stanford Law Review, the Supreme Court Review, the Virginia Law Review, the Duke Law Journal, and of course the Northwestern Law Review, among others. John has established himself as the most prominent academic defender of the importance of supermajority rules, and he is also a leading defender of the theory of originalism in constitutional interpretation. John is also a superb teacher and colleague. In 1997, he received the Paul M. Bator Award from the Federalist Society, given to an outstanding legal scholar and teacher under the age of 40. The award especially goes to teachers who are successful mentors and role models. I once had the pleasure of sitting in on some of John's classes, and his teaching was truly stellar. It's easy to see how he's inspired countless students and has become a very successful mentor and role model. John also excels in debate and in discussion over the dinner table. He has a real talent for forming very close and meaningful friendships and for a camaraderie that is truly unique. John is warm, funny, has strong opinions, and loves a good conversation or debate. He thrives on the life of the mind, and he lives out the principle that the unexamined life is not worth living. John is very good company in good times and in bad, and he is loyal and honest in every way. In sum, John is wise, brave, temperate, and just, all of which makes him a truly wonderful person, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce him to you today as he's appointed to be the George C. Dix Professor of Constitutional Law. Thank you.
Well, President Shapiro, Dean Rodriguez, my colleagues, and invited guests, first of all, thank you so much, Steve, for those very kind remarks and for your great friendship over the years. Well, today I guess I begin at my beginnings to thank my mother and father who made this day possible. My father, who happily is in the audience, always played the cheerful provocateur, ready to offer an unconventional but often compelling view of the world. My mother, who sadly cannot travel, was much more the kind diplomat. But both provocation and diplomacy are useful, perhaps indispensable assets in academics. The first, to stir things up, to get an opening for new ideas, and the second, to create an atmosphere to get a fair hearing. I'm also in debt to my wife, Arta Spence. Northwestern, of course, has earned a reputation as a premier law school for social science. I am now more at home here because I have a fine social scientist at home. Thanks to my colleagues for their constant help, even with ideas that they sometimes, perhaps it would be fairly more said, often find quite unpersuasive and to which they're not entirely sympathetic. And finally, I'm grateful to the family of George C. Dix, a 1925 graduate of this law school, for giving this chair. I'm going to say a few words about my work. Probably the quickest way to do so will be to describe the two books that I'll publish next year. And of course, my editors have tried to suggest that I should speak about these on every possible occasion. The first is entitled Accelerating Democracy, Matching Governance to Technological Change. Continuous technological innovation, driven by the exponential increase in the power of computers, is the fundamental fact of our time, creating a restless world of relentless change. Accelerating Democracy offers a program to adapt democracy to this new world by placing democracy itself within the domain of information technology. New information technologies like empiricism, prediction markets, and dispersed media like blogs can combine to help to solve a problem as old as democracy itself: how to help citizens better evaluate the consequences of their political decisions. Or to put it as the ancients did, how does Athens know what Athenians know? The answer today is that we must legally empower these new technologies to improve the best of the model of governance we have, a politics that seeks to be informed by expertise and social scientific knowledge while shedding the arrogance and insularity of a technocracy. For instance, to take just one example, we must legalize prediction markets so that ordinary citizens can bet on policy outcomes to keep experts, politicians, and yes, professors more honest. The second book, written with my friend Michael Rappaport, is entitled Originalism and the Good Constitution. This book argues that the original meaning of constitutional provisions forged in the past are likely to have good consequences today. Its key idea is that our supermajoritarian constitution-making process leads to the entrenchment of norms, good norms, and is better than any other process, certainly the process of judicial fabrication, that can be devised for making good constitutional provisions. And since constitutional provisions are good by virtue of the consensus support they received, their continued beneficence depends on giving them the meaning that gained the consensus. Not my meaning, not some judge's meaning, their meaning. Does any theme connect what may seem to be rather disparate works, one about the past, the other about our accelerating future? Both, I think, reflect the view that public law should be focused on creating processes that over time help people better gather information about the world, both about their own preferences and even more importantly about the consequences of the polity's policies and structures. While the Constitution is rightly celebrated as a document that generates a better politics through an intricate set of checks and balances, those careful checks and delicate balances were themselves the products of the greatest concentration of dispersed social knowledge for constructing political institutions that the world had ever known. And this first popular science of politics was made possible not only by the intensive deliberation encouraged by the supermajority requirements of the Constitution, but by the freedoms of the press and assembly that we inherited from Great Britain, freedoms that took advantage of the technological change of that day, like the printing press. Today, it seems to me the essential task of political reform, of political structure, is no different. Creating rules that will capture for policymaking the information latent in the world that is there now, better for the taking because of our innovations in technology. But technological acceleration, those very innovations, makes this task even more urgent, because it creates both the potential for Elysian benefits and Stygian catastrophes. A society's capacity for learning must be increased to match its capacity for change. Thank you very much for your help.